Sabrina was always a fun, loving, caring person. And as life happened, I think I slowly started to lose that. I found my voice again, roughly 31. I was everything to everyone. You know, you would be the daughter, the wife, the mother, the friend, the sister. But who am I to myself? And the truth was I didn't know. I think at a very young age I was searching for purpose. Because I experienced a lot of rejection and abandonment, I was searching for my own meaning, like there must be a reason why I'm here. You know when they say when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear? The reality is sometimes the teacher's always been there, you just wasn't ready, right? I think sometimes we live too consciously, we're too superficial, we need to get deeper. I became a single mum and for me my world crumbled because my biggest fear was to become a single mum because I saw what my mother went through. You know, she was working 3 jobs, she worked so hard raising a child that was really poorly. One of the things I promised myself and my children was that I want to create an incubator where they can be childlike for as long as possible. One family, 6 dreams, 1 mission. But we are all very different. My kids have been asked to coach in different places. I'm like, they're a child. I'm saying this to say, what could you possibly be holding your family back from by only living according to what you know?
How do you create that space in a life like yours that is very busy? And how do you ensure that you don't get to a burnout stage then? Welcome to Everyday Leadership. And today I have someone who has a lot of layers to them. And you all know how I love, this is one of the reasons why I created this podcast, talking to people who have multiple things. And not that they have multiple things, but they're showcasing those different areas and talents and utilizing them to actually make a difference. And that's what I love. I have Sabrina Ben Salmi in the house. She is a multi-award winning business person development consultant, public speaker, UN delegate, author, publisher, mom to Fantastic Five, which I know you're thinking, what's Fantastic Five? All right, we'll talk about that. We'll into that show. And so much more. You're someone who, like I said, has won multiple awards, even for the way that you've talked about different things that you have navigated and obviously how you're also raising your kids, as well as the work that you're doing around transformation, with the young people in particular as well. And that's why I said, like, this conversation is going to go into many different directions, but I'm looking forward to it. And I thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm actually looking forward to taking a deep dive into our conversation.
And I'm curious, if I was to just move away from all the titles and accolades and things that you have done, how would you introduce yourself?
Just Sabrina.
Who is Sabrina?
Becoming. I'm always becoming, always evolving. I'm fun. I call myself a female Peter Pan. You know, I have kids and they give me an opportunity to tap into my inner child. So I'm very playful, down to earth, but I love our conversation that we had. We are all multifaceted. We all have multiple talents, but often we're told to hide most of them and only reveal one to the world. So my message often is stop hiding yourself from the world. Show people what you do. Be playful.
Has that element of you showcasing yourself always been there for us? Do you scale it back to a younger version of you, like pre-teens, or were you like then?
Oh, God. Pre-teens, that's going back a few years. From the little I can remember, that I think the reality is the younger we are, the more of ourself we are. The reason I raise my kids the way I do is because one of the beliefs I have is that we gather limescale as we go through life. Remove the limescale and we start to present. So if I go back to teenage Sabrina, I was very outspoken. I was always speaking for the underdog, standing up for those that couldn't stand up for themselves. I had a wealth of dreams, but life happens. And gradually we start to disbelieve our fantasies and dreams. You know, get your head out of the clouds, they say. Stop dreaming. No, that's not for people like us. So Sabrina was always a fun, loving, caring person. And as life happened, I think I slowly started to lose that. And I found my voice again, roughly 31. When I asked myself a question like, who am I to myself. I was everything to everyone. You want to be the daughter, the wife, the mother, the friend, the sister, and so on and so forth. There's so many labels. But who am I to myself? And the truth was, I didn't know. At that time, I had lost myself in the mesh of demands and having to show up for everyone else that I didn't even know who I was, to the extent that I was going shopping and not even buying things for myself. Food shopping consisting of everything else that everyone liked, everyone's favorite item, but I wasn't present. And that awareness didn't show up until I was in a coaching session with one of my first coaches, actually. He just asked me, when you go shopping, what do you buy? You can learn a lot about someone by their shopping list. And I was like, my ex-husband, I was like, he likes this and my children like that. And there was nothing on the list. I would just eat whatever. I would drink whatever. And very much that was how I was in life. I was a people pleaser. I would do whatever was fashionable for everyone else, but I wasn't there for myself. And that was really when the rebirthing started to happen. I was like, wow, where is Sabrina? Let me go and find her.
One thing you just talked about there was when you were younger, you had dreams and aspirations, which then kind of got shifted away as life happened. Do you remember what it was that you were dreaming about in those years?
Oh, God. Oh, God. I was an only child from my mother. My dad's Nigerian, my mother's St. Lucian. So I had experienced quite a lot of adversity. Like in that time, there was lots of issues between Africans and West Indians, and I was like the living, breathing product of it. Like it was quite traumatic. But I had all these dreams of just serving people, solving problems. I would go out with my mum. She worked in the city. And I remember we lived in East London and the billboards would look different. I noticed that the drink prices were different, the food prices was different. So I was always very curious. And I had this dream since I was about roughly 7 that I drew a bridge. And the whole idea around that was if I got wealthy people to cross the bridge and meet people that was less affluent, they could exchange information, because I'm a true believer that it's not about money. I think we all have something to learn from someone else. Some people don't have money, but they are so happy and they're connected in life. Mm-hmm. People ask, why do you smile so much? I've got all this money and I don't have that joy that you have. And I just always thought that if the two of them connected and spoke, perhaps we could solve so many problems in the world. I wanted to be a footballer. Well, I was a footballer when I was a teenager. I used to play for Millwall Lionesses. I had quite a lot of turbulence through school. I just didn't settle much in school. I was diagnosed with dyslexia quite late in life. But I just loved people. So as a young person, I just loved seeing people happy because I knew what it felt like not to be.
Such a powerful imagery to have at 7 of the wealthy crossing the bridge and other people meeting them and kind of exchanging information just to help both sides. Because if you think about that, that's such a even understanding of the fact that there is a wealth divide, there's an information divide, and that's why the haves and the have-nots exist. So it sounds like you were looking at things and thinking about things from a very, very different perspective than I'm guessing a lot of young people at that point in time who were just probably thinking about toys and play and fun.
I played all day. I played the marbles on the drains. I was a very imaginative person. I did play all day, but I think because I had quite a lot of childhood illnesses, I think at a very young age I was searching for purpose. Because I experienced a lot of rejection and abandonment, I was searching for my own meaning, like there must be a reason why I'm here. And I think that's what really, I didn't understand it obviously when I was that young, but when I look back, I can see that there was a deep searching for who am I, why am I here? If they don't want me, there must be meaning to my life.
You wanted to go and do computer science at university. Yeah. And obviously you passed, you had a grade, but you got diagnosed at uni with dyslexia. That's in your 20s, right? Did you have any signs before that at all?
Oh, God, yes. A plethora of signs. God. People always said I was just very odd. I learned very differently. I realised that there were so many things that started to make sense with the diagnosis. And even how the diagnosis came about is quite interesting. I think I was attending like, I guess, like the opening essence of the course when they kind of do the tour and different aspects. And it was just in a kind of chance conversation, they mentioned something. And you know, like when the switch just turns on and goes, oh, I've never thought about that before. And then when I went through the diagnosis, it was like a light bulb really did switch on, because it was like, oh, that makes sense now. But I think even for me, it was an expansion of awareness, because being in my 20s, you know, dyslexia was always associated to, you know, being dunce, being stupid. There was all these negative connotations. And I think the whole diagnosis really opened my eyes that dyslexia, just like other profiles, have so many different profiles. There's just not one fixation as to what the diagnosis is. We have multiple, components for each diagnosis. And, you know, some of the things that was like, does the word spin around? I was like, no, that doesn't happen. I would run. You know, it was just this awareness of, we need to get used to asking questions rather than assuming. Because there was so much resistance around even telling people, because I didn't want them to have this assumption that I couldn't read, I couldn't this, I couldn't that. Because a lot of people that have dyslexia, especially now, we live in a world that we understand, people that have dyslexia, they are so vibrant and abundant in terms of their IQ. It doesn't it doesn't impact their IQ as such. There's other things that go on. Because I had very serious childhood health complications. I had like a tracheotomy. My brain had been starved of all oxygen. They said that basically I would be a cabbage. I wouldn't be able to move. Thankfully, you know, I'm fine. But there are so many different profiles, and it just really educated me around, wow, it doesn't determine our IQ, so why hide that? But I did live for many years not sharing it, just because people just asked me very strange questions. So I was too embarrassed for a period of time.
So how did you go from living with many years and not sharing it to then writing a book about it and talking about it?
Do you know, I think this conversation is really beautiful, because I'm thinking about, I didn't think we were going to talk about this. I think if we surrender to life's teaching, you know, when they say when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear. Yeah. The reality is sometimes the teacher's always been there, you just wasn't ready, right? And what I realized is when I surrendered to being on purpose, you just listen to the guidance, okay? So a lot of my journey has been, I've heard that internal voice. I've got a very deep relationship with God. But I was a rebellious child. It's like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm not ready. I don't have what it takes. You know, I can't get started. It needs to look like this. No, he said he's going to send me a brown package. This one's blue. It's not mine. So I thought I knew it all, but I could hear the guidance. So it was very liberating when I actually became an author because of the diagnosis. And when I became a publisher, you know, we have these jokes of, you know, I'm a dyslexic publisher, I'm a dyslexic author. And it really is to play on people's mindsets. You see, the prison that we really need to escape is our mind. The reality is the confinements of our mind allow us to grow or keep us stuck. So publishing a book wasn't so much about the book. It was about me surrendering to me living life on purpose. This was a commitment I had with God. I said, you know, take me, mold me. There's a song, I think it's Tony Gang. No, it's not. I can't remember the song. I most likely send it to you. But when I was young, there's this song that moved me so much. And it's basically a prayer to God, a call to God, a cry to God. And I said, you know, take me, use me, make me what you want me to be, and show the whole world what I can become so that they can. And the book was very much one of those things. I remember my coach at the time, Ewan Wong, he sent me to this 2-week transformational course, and I learned things that I couldn't possibly put into words about life and perception and mindset. And I remember at the end, they just asked questions, and I remember my body standing up and my brain like, why are you standing up? And I literally just stood up and I said, I'm going to write a book. And that was the birth of the book. So I'm going to write a book to share with mothers, as I was a single mum. Was I a single mum at the time? No, I wasn't. I've always had a heart for single mums. My mum was a single mum. I was a single mum at a period of time. But at the time I was married. And I remember standing up, and I knew at that moment that God was going to do something with me, because I did not want to stand up. It was a crowd of people, and I put my hands up and I said, I'm going to write a book to share. And the book was the business card. It was only the invitation. But that book changed my life in terms of who I was becoming. And we're always becoming. We never get to our there, so to speak. We go from there to there to there. And that was really the birthing of the book. And it was just invigorating, but it was really purpose book, not so much, oh, I'm going to write a book.
I was just praise that those who live intentional lives lead from the inside out, not the outside in. And you stepping into that calling and answering the voice inside of you led to you then impacting so many of their lives and allowing other people to also be seen and be heard, I guess, in a way that you wish you had been as well. But for you to do that, it required you to listen to your inner voice and go into that. And that sounds one of the hardest things for people to do, but it's also one of the most fulfilling things for people to do as well.
I love what you said. Oh, I've got to remember to talk because you're sharing such wisdom. Some of the wisdom that I learned in my own journey is when we seek love, give love. You know, I often ask my clients, if you're only kind to those that are kind to you, is that truly kindness? And if you only love those that love you, is that really love? And I think sometimes we just need to surrender. There's a beautiful poem, I don't know if it's a song. It says, dance like no one's watching, sing like no one can hear you. And, you know, love like you've never been hurt before. It's easier said than done. But when we can surrender to that aspect of our being, that's when things go beyond what we understand. It's not a conscious, I think sometimes we live too consciously. We're too superficial. We need to get deeper. You know, they talk about footballers and tennis players, how fast they hit that ball. And they couldn't do it if they're consciously hitting. They have to actually surrender into the unconscious to actually return a ball that's going, I think they said between 45 to 90 miles an hour or 70. So that's significant, profound realization, is that when we're always got our guard up, when we're always scared, when we're always in that conscious state, we're only touching the tip of the iceberg of what we can. But when we surrender, a lot of my journey was people are going to talk all the time. So why would I stand still? It'd be better if they talk and I'm progressing rather than me being fearful of what they're going to say and I stay put.
It's such a powerful way to hear you breaking things down the way that you are. And it's one thing that comes to my head is like, okay, people hearing you right now, they're like, this sounds amazing and this sounds really empowering and inspirational, but I'm just not there. And one thing I want to do is peel back, because I think what we're talking about now is the 31-year-old you and onwards who found your voice. If you were to go back to the 20-year-old you who first had a child, between that stage and those 11 years of 20 to 31, without you, what were you like then? What was going on for you in that period of time of becoming a young mother, getting married, and then having more kids and navigating?
I think that's a great question. I love that. I always say to people, if you want to go on the journey, you can't look at where I am, you've got to look at where I was. That's where the golden nuggets are. I guess in plain terms, I was beaten up in life. I just kept on going. That the faith instilled resilience. I had to keep getting up. You know, when they say you get knocked down twice, you get up twice. It felt like I was getting knocked down twice and getting up 10 times. It was, you know, when you analyze where you come from, I think it's so important when they say you have to know where you come from in order to get to where you're going, right?
Yeah.
I had to do some deep searching, deep soul searching around who am I? Who really am I? And again, just like how you started this conversation, not the labels, like who am I? What is my purpose? Where are we going? I had to ask myself questions of where are my strengths and weaknesses? What do I have access to? You know, people would say that money creates money. Really, resourcefulness creates legacy. And I mean beyond words that I can possibly put into words. I had to ask myself some deep questions about, look at the patterns that exist in my bloodline. What am I up against? Because although we're all at the 100-meter line, we didn't all get here the same. Some of us had to borrow shoes 30 seconds before we got to the line. Some of us had it handed down to us. I had to start looking at what patterns of behavior was in my family that I had to uproot and what ones did I need to plant. which ones did I need to take a deeper dive in? I had to start thinking about, what is it that I didn't understand or knew I existed? And how do I go about achieving that? And I had to ask questions. I had to be curious. You see, our natural love for life, that childlike curiosity, that's where the secret is, turning over the stones and just looking at what's beneath it, not assuming, not predicting, just surrendering to what presents as you turn over the stones. So I must say there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of letdown. I became a single mum, and for me, my world crumbled when I was about 22. Because my biggest fear was to become a single mum, because I saw what my mother went through. She was working 3 jobs. She worked so hard raising a child that was really poorly. And I was actually bullied for coming from a single parent family. Life has changed so much now. I would get bullied and people would say things like, if your dad doesn't want you, no one else will. Like, imagine the programming I sort of started to accept. People didn't, where I was, there wasn't really, I think maybe only one other family or couple, but the reason they were a single family, the dad had died, so it was very unusual. You didn't really come from a single parent family. It wasn't the norm. And I remember just feeling so bad about that. I took on that burden. So I had a lot of confidence issues. I was constantly reminded that there was no purpose for me, not from my mother, but from people around me. I was constantly let down and judged very harshly by my father when I met him when I was roughly 9. So there was a lot of uncertainty, me growing up, me having a sense of direction, purpose, security, just knowing that someone's got my back, that, it was me and my mum against the world. So there was a lot of fear. And I remember being a child, and one of the biggest fears I had is that if anything ever happened to my mother, I would go into care, or I would be at her funeral alone. And I remember living through a lot of my childhood of that loneliness. But the deep sense of pain, at the time I didn't know. Looking back, obviously now you start to connect the dots, I think was very much a catalyst to help me deepen that connection to my purpose of the priceless essence of family, connection, healing. But I didn't know that at the time. But going back, it was just constant pain. I remember just constantly crying, being in pain, and going to the doctors about diagnosis, and they couldn't find out what was going on. My body was just falling apart. It was just crying out, like, why is life so painful? What is going on? Why can't I just seem to find a place to rest? I was always, I guess they term it, the black sheep of the family, and just very odd. So I would go to my West Indian side and they would say, Africans are like this, but I had to sleep there. And then the Africans would say, the West Indian, they're too westernized. And it was just confusing. I must say that it's so important for the listener to understand the turbulence. I experienced domestic abuse from the love of my life. When if you're a female and listening to this, when you're in love so deeply that when they call you, you don't even hear your own name, you hear the person's name. It's like, hi, your head's just in the cloud. So when that turned around, my whole world fell apart. So I was just trying to pick up the pieces. And I think the only time I could truly say that the pain shifted was when I had a deep sense of, this is not just about me. It was about the kids. When it became that my life wasn't about me, it was about the kids. I think that's when this opening of this giving up isn't an option. Failing isn't an option. Staying still isn't an option. So I just had to keep getting up. I faced a lot of criticism, not so much outside. Home wasn't really a place I could just thrive. My partner wasn't supportive at all. Would constantly just verbalize all of the internal insecurities I had. Was I good enough? I didn't look like the way I needed to be presenting myself, or, I was scared about writing the book, and he would say, the book's going to be rubbish. It's not going to be any good. Who would read something from you? And I remembered all of that. And at the time it was painful. When I look back, I realized that a tendency when people go through abuse, the abuser tries to turn off the lights that they like about you so other people are not attracted. But it was such a lonely time. But interestingly, I don't know what really kept it, but there was this beautiful fire in me. And I guess it's just only God, because I was always prayerful. I was always asking and searching for the next step. And I just remembered that I would be smiling. I remember people saying, you've got a fake smile. And I smiled because people didn't know what I was overcoming on a daily basis. People didn't know where I came from. People didn't know that I was just experiencing just this excitement and joy of what was showing up, where people were going like, wow, how are you doing this? And I'm like, I don't know, it's really cool, right? So there was this level of innocence to this development of myself, because because of the training I went on, I was able to be the observer in my journey, not just the experiencer. Okay, so yeah, it's a great question. You caught me off guard a little bit. I didn't realize we would go this deep, but yeah, it's incredible. Thank you for the gift of the question.
Yeah, thank you for the authenticity in the response, because I think that in itself just speaks volumes. Because I think there are so many of us who are going through, in a sense, our own version of that. And whether it's around the voices around us, sometimes that is family, sometimes that's friends, sometimes that might even be work, for example, where that's all we ever know, that's all our identity is. And we just get so beaten down and we just stay down there. And it can feel like there is no way out. It can feel like this is it, this is all I know. And hearing someone to say that, you know what, I've gone through this, I've been beaten down, and there are times when it was hard to get up, but I did, and I made it through, and I leveraged that experience and I used it as a stepping stone to help me to move into the next evolution of who I am. But not just that, I also didn't stay bitter. You still had the smile on your face. You were able to build a life for your children and raise amazing kids as well, despite your circumstances. And that is powerful. And this made me even smile when I think about what you said at the start or earlier on around. They said like, oh, you would struggle when you were born and everything else because of lack of oxygen. But then hearing your journey, and for me, it's like, you've been a fighter, you've been resilient right from birth. Like disproving the doctors wrong, disproving so many people wrong. And it just seems like there's just been several iterations of that character that you've had from when you were born all the way throughout your journey as well.
Absolutely. You know, as you were talking, I think for us mums, I think I should just share a little aspect. It's getting it done, then getting it right. Sometimes we not allow, because I think I think we need to stop saying you should leave or you could just do this. It's having compassion and empathy for where you are. I remember I used to beat myself up, like, how can I do this to the kids? Why am I still here? I'm capable. But I remember going along with my daughter, my oldest daughter. She was homeschooled roughly year 5. She should be, roughly year 5. And she was out of school for about a year and a half. And I remembered I had to take her along. Not had to, but I decided to take her along to training because I was on this journey of becoming. And I realized that I was so committed to that I could not stop, but I could not leave her. So it was a case, can I just bring her along? And that was the birthing of my 5 children joining. And, you know, it's so profound what God does, little by little, step by step. And as a mother, I remembered that this thing, oh, I'm on a call, may you shut the door. I've got a client at this time. If you guys could just be quiet for a bit and mummy will take you out afterwards. And there was a time where things shifted. When I was having clients, I started opening the doors. I started asking them to listen. When I was building websites and everything else, I was asking their opinion. So there wasn't this separation. I didn't want them to start resenting the work I do and seeing the work as if it's taking mummy away. And don't get me wrong, not every career can allow that, but to some extent, just do our best to, because that was the moment when things shifted, because there was this hot mess between work-life balance. I could not balance anything. I was coming home, the kids were literally swinging off the chandeliers and dad was watching TV and I'm like, this is not a balance. This is heart-wrenching. I'm outside trying to find myself, but I don't have the peace of mind to be able to do that. I remember one night I was coming back from Heathrow and I called home, as you do on the way home, just checking in. And my son was on the phone having an asthma attack and no one knew. And it felt like I had died. My soul just left me because his attacks can be quite acute very quickly. And I just said, could I speak to Pups? I think it was, I would have said to speak to Pups. Or I spoke to Shay, my oldest daughter. I said, Trey's having an asthma attack. You need to call the ambulance. So they didn't realise what was going on. He was playing somewhere. And I remember that I called the ambulance. I got off the phone, called the ambulance. I was just petrified. They took him to hospital, I think with my daughter, because he had to stay with the kids. And I didn't even know what hospital they took him to. And I thought, if I'm going through this, I wonder how many other mothers are going through this. And I said, I cannot possibly keep going out and leaving my kids because I don't know if they're going to be there when I get home. And there was so much going on. There were so many challenges. It would be too much for this interview. And I'm so glad you're asking that question because there is the turmoil before the birthing. The soil has to be turned before you plant the seed. And I must say that all the experiential, immersive learnings that I had in my journey makes absolute sense. At the time, I'm like, that's not what I want to hear. Like, why are you telling me this? But because I have such a big purpose to help families, I needed to know what families really go through. Because I'm a big believer that if we have superficial conversations, we can only discover superficial solutions. And the deeper we go, the more we understand. So now there's so much dreams around programs that we want to put together to heal families, to connect families, but we've lived it. There are things that I can see happening in families that I wouldn't see if I hadn't been through it. So you've got a beautiful podcast. Just really thank you for what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you. And it's people like you who come through and make it what it is. Because for me, this is what it is to actually just show up and to lead. As you were talking, there's this quote I heard that came to mind. I think it is. I might butcher this. Like, the pain we endure is not a test of our strength. It's the fire that forges us into who we're meant to become. And it's that emergence that you talked about, I think for me really, really captivates that. And I'm curious because you now, as a mother, you've gone into, I talked about earlier in the intro, the Fantastic Five. You've had multi-award winning authors, publishers, speakers, consultants, presenters, ranging from 10 to 23-year-old for your kids, which is remarkable. That's, I mean, having one, all five, being in this space, and then obviously I think about what you said around integrating both of those two elements together of your work and the kids listening in and coming along, it makes sense. But even that, it still doesn't mean that that's a path or a journey that the kids are going to go down. It still doesn't mean that, even with you homeschooling as well. So it's like there's so many different things that you were still doing on top of your growth and your healing, but being able to help mold and shape these kids into who they have become, who are also then pouring out into the world in their own ways as well, is absolutely remarkable. And I guess people ask, like, how did you manage to be able to do that?
That's a great question, and as much as I appreciate all the words, I have to be honest. The glory, the testimony, and all of it belongs to God. You see, sometimes we get in our own way. When I have conversations with God, it's as vivid as you and I. So I remember one time being in my eldest daughter's room. We were all in the room, and we were just playing and vibing. And this question came about, what's your superhero skills, right? Like, as a parent, ask your children that. Or, if your aunt, uncle, just borrow a child. And their eyes light up. And they were like, da, 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 and I can do this. And I was like, huh? What's going on here? So the doing is not me. It's the allowing. You see, when a child is, when we talk about our own childhood, being 7, we're like jumping off walls and your parents saying, get off there. We believe we can fly, so just let us fly. Right? So it's less of the doing and it's more of the preventing. I have to prevent myself from interrupting their unique essence. As parenthood revealed to me that I'm a steward of a soul. I'm not a parent of a soul in terms of that connotation, the worldly connotation, like I know more than you don't know nothing, I do love tradition, don't get me wrong, I love respect, please don't get that twisted. I think there's a thin line between respect and elders, that bit's beautiful. But sometimes we have this misconception that children are a blank canvas. They're not. God knew us before we entered into our mother's womb. And there's a signature that we have to activate in terms of who we are, who our purpose is. So that question around what are your superhero skills really led to a deeper essence of what have you come here to do? Kids spend their entire childhood asking, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're like, they don't have a clue. They don't know what your world is like. They know their world and they know that they are unstoppable. So one of the things I promised myself and my children was that I want to create an incubator where they can be childlike for as long as possible, where they can accumulate as little limescale as possible. Like when you go to the park with your child and there's a perimeter, you go through the fence, you're like, yeah, go wild. And they're like, I can't wait to let go of her hands. I could go anywhere I want. But as a parent, this is gay. And it's like when they let go, like, yeah, I'm free. I can go anywhere. But there's the safety. So what I wanted to do was create these safety perimeters. I was very much aware of what wasn't in our family, what was needed to get to where we were going. Anything we want to do, we don't arrive there and go, I'm a billionaire, I'll wait for everyone else to catch up. There are people there already, right? So the reality is it's being curious and inquisitive around where you desire to be and meet people there. Go and find out where those spaces are and immerse. So a lot of what I did with the kids is the allowance of who they are. Stop shutting them down. And I think everything I talk about, I always be very careful around context. I don't like when people say, oh, don't interrupt, don't put your dreams into your children. Sometimes children need inspiration. Sometimes children need to go, actually, you're doing it for a month because you can see something in them that they can't see. And it's the ebbs and flow. The deeper you have that connection and relationship with your child, the deeper you'll start to understand when they need a push, when they need a pull, when they need to be let alone. So it was a dance. And as a mother, I had to learn a different dance with each child. Some children were good at the tango, some liked the waltz, some liked to do a little bit of R&B, some liked the jazz, some liked the soul. And I think it was really about what is this child's genre? And when we understand what the genre is, it's how can we spend more time practicing the steps and surrender to the rest. Sometimes we think we need to know everything. I really emphasize the importance of the doing, but also the hibernation. We have to leave space for God. We don't know it all. And I had to keep going back to God because I didn't create these children. I didn't understand everything they were saying initially. I had to learn the language. Did I have to learn the language? It's not like, oh, you'll do this. Some of them were like, I ain't doing that. And it's amazing when we're on stage. I always say to people, we are an ordinary family. Just getting people to just shift the norm. Let's just change the narrative. Let's just raise the bar a little bit. One of the dreams that we have is to do this Ben Salmi World tour. We're doing it at the moment, but we just want to take it more international. And the aspect is no family is perfect. People have these things like, oh, your children are so well behaved. Like, I have no immunity pill for teenage hormones. Like, if you get it, let me know. We are an average family, but the only thing we're doing differently is that we're living life on purpose. Okay, we're one family, 6 dreams, 1 mission, but we are all very different. But it's understanding that why do we have to be so serious around what we do? My children do public speaking, not for the public speaking and, the notoriety. What is that about at a deeper level is to develop confidence, is to give them that permission that I have something worth sharing and I'm going to share it. Sometimes it will lay on fertile ground, sometimes it won't. And it's them getting to a place where they're okay with that. And being on stage is so powerful because you're able to influence. If you want someone to raise their hands, they do it. You want them to call out something, they do it. So I'm teaching, and one of my sons said something so profound. He said, leadership is like being a conductor of an orchestra. And I was like, wow, it's a two-way learning. I don't just teach them, we're all learning from each other. And life is very much like that. If they're on stage and you get them to be a conductor, you get them to start composing things differently. You get them to see strengths that they wouldn't necessarily see. If I was to tell you the amount of times they've gone on stage and said something, we're like, where did you get that from? I've not heard that before. It's a first experience for us. We don't sit at home and rehearse lines or prepare things. If we needed a slide, that's different. We might have a family slide. But we go there, and one of the things is that prayer before we go on stage. Remove me and fill me up with you, God. Let me serve the audience. So a lot of what the kids do is this servitude leadership, because if you're just the same everywhere you go, you don't leave space to serve that one person in the audience. So we have this kind of thing in our family. Everyone gets scared when you do public speaking, and some of the most famous people with arcs, like, do you still get nervous? They're like, yeah. And it's because I care so much. And that's a good thing. So we're like, okay, get that out of the window then, because we have this perception that there's going to be a time when everything's perfect and you're okay. It's not going to happen. You feel the fear and you do it anyway. And the great thing is that we just say, you might feel really scared, fearful, but we're doing it to save one person that was like us. So it really is this knowing of, we know what we needed when we were going through our stuff, and we're just going to serve, and we're going to keep serving. And the more we serve, the more we believe that those seeds eventually are going to land on some fertile ground. So a lot of how they became or becoming is very much mentors, immersive experiences, learning away from me, because if they only learn through me, there's only so much they can grasp, there's only so much they can learn. So it's having an array of experiences. Private schools are really good at this. When you send a child to private school, they have every language, every sport, every instrument, because the reality is we don't know our talents until we are immersed. What we think we can do is one thing, but it's what we need to search for is what we don't know about ourselves. And when we have a lot of those experiences, parts of us will begin to present. So it's just, there's not a day that goes by that I don't thank God for this level of experience as a family, being able to have like-minded conversations with the family. The world calls it entrepreneurship. I call it natural essence of creativity. We're all creative, right? And it's like, oh, your children are entrepreneurs. They're just creative. Every child can solve a problem. Sit down with your children, write 10 problems. They would say, where's the rest of the problems for me to solve? They have an answer for everything, okay? And it's getting them to practice being. Get them to practice being. I cannot emphasize it enough, because it's in the being where things will surpass your wildest imagination. So, my kids have been asked to coach men that are 60, in their 60s, 70s, and in different places. I can't go into too much details. And I'm like, they're a child. And I'm saying this to say, what could you possibly be holding your family back from by only living according to what you know? Because the reality is we live outside of what we understand, because what we understand is not enough. Okay? We have our own dreams and plans, but God's vision and purpose for us is so much bigger. So it's fun.
You mentioned your one family, 6 dreams, 1 vision. What is that vision? So
our mission is to become a household name, not for us, but for God, because God loves families. Our mission is to save families that could potentially have an opportunity to thrive and heal. And that really is our mission. Our mission is really to heal families, because I came from a broken family. I raised my kids in a broken family. I've seen so much over the years in terms of the clients that we've served, the organizations we've worked with. I've seen when things work, and I've seen how things that are not working can start to work with a little tweak. So the big mission for us is to see families thriving. Families, father at the head of the home, the mothers, mothers just being able to surrender into their femininity so they could just be. Like, if you want to go to work, that's up to you. If you don't, you just have a choice. Our mission really is, it's not a brand new thing. We just want to reset things the way it used to be. When children can grow up in healthy, happy homes, they don't have childhoods that they need to heal from. Okay? Mothers need support, fathers need support, children need support. And it really is, the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village from mother and father not to be burnt out. Okay, so, our mission really is just to see families thriving, sitting down, having family meetings, creating legacy. You see, every family can have their own legacy. We don't all want the same things. We can all serve each other still if we're all working at the top of our game. But just imagine that beautiful utopia of families thriving. Children don't ask for much. One thing that really hurts is when children come from single-parent households or broken environments. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying single parents are negative. I've been a single mum. I'm a single mum at the moment. And although we work hard, that's not how it's intended. Families are supposed to be a certain way. And it's beneficial for everyone's mental health. You see, when you're going through so much turbulence and the cortisol is high, you're on a thin line of death, okay? Let's just keep it real. Burnout is real. And life is not a joke. Life is too short. So it's really creating that environment where everyone feels listened to and heard. But like I said, children are asking for much. To remove a lot of these wounds that they go into adulthood with, they're looking to be seen, heard, and loved. They just want to know that they are wanted. And a lot of these mishaps that they grow up with can be removed very easily just by us listening to each other. Sometimes our insecurities shut us down and turn us into someone that we don't even recognize. Sometimes we just need someone to hold our hands to walk us through that pathway. But there's so many of us that have issues that can be resolved if we just have someone to turn to. Be honest, 85% of families don't have support, and that's a staggering number.
In all of that, because one thing's that's key to that is for you to have the space to be able to have, I guess, quiet time, space to be able to hear God's voice and God's direction and vision for your life, and then you execute and you walk in that space for yourself to be able to step away from, I want to call it the noise of a day-to-day living. How do you create that space in a life like yours that is very busy? And how do you ensure that you don't get to a burnout stage then?
Oh, I've definitely experienced burnout several times in the past. I think that's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is my daughter, the eldest one, a couple of years back, she created this amazing system for me. It's called 15 for me. And it was about mothers, fathers, just caregivers, carving out 15 for you. It might be a 15-minute walk. It might be reading the book for 15 minutes. It might be doing breathing exercise for 15 minutes. And that's a very practical way, because I'm very mindful of context. Like, what is practical to share with a listener, right? Like, that's something very practical, tangible. So that is something that she gifted to me, and I'm so overwhelmed when it was presented to me, because I was really in a place where just running around, okay? But I think today I'm in a very different place, and we need different things for different stages of life, right? When you might break your leg, you might need crutches, you might need a plaster cast, but you're not always going to have that, right? So where I am in my life, it's that there's an organics of balance. Balance might look like this when you start, but then when you learn to ride a bike, you just ride. Balance in the water might be looking like doggy paddles just to try and keep your head above water, but that's a phase, it's a stage of finding balance. Then you're able to swim. So I think for me, when people say, when do you have that time away, is we are family in. So there's organically time to breathe, because I'm not in the stage of doggy paddling, just trying to keep my head above water. Does that make sense? So it's very hard to sort of say this is the specific. You know, I go out, we socialize a lot. So surprisingly, it's not so much going out doing stuff. Like for us, it's like, oh, let's just chill, pajama day, you know, duvet day. Let's just hang out and, you know, who's at the door? So it's less of the, how can I say, the force of, and there's a beautiful organics. It's like you breaking down, like, what did you do when you were reading? You're like, well, I know how to read. You're not pronouncing that, you're not announcing the letters, you're not doing the phonics. You know how to read now. So it's about lifestyle. I think for you as a listener, when you're listening, just analyze your lifestyle. Do you have a lifestyle that there's a lot of noise and you're struggling? And then the diagnosis is really about what needs to happen. And I think at every phase of our life is just diagnosing where are the gaps. So a lot of the things that I do, just to answer your question, is I love walking, I love riding. Sometimes I'll go off with one of my kids on my own, just go for a cycle. And me and my youngest at the moment, we go and do this, it's quite far. He loves cycling. So we go off, just the two of us, and just go and cycle, spending time with friends, talking on the phone. But to be honest, I love nothing more than talking to people and helping. Not so much in, oh, you know, what's your problem? Tell me your problem. I'm an only child, so I've got that natural curiosity to learn life. One of my dreams is to do a PhD and just to understand deeper nature of why we make decisions, human behavior, how we come together, how we create things. So if you say it in terms of work, but you never stop working it, when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. So it's hard to create a separation because that's who Sabrina is. I love talking to people. I love this cheeky nature of I'm speaking to someone, I'm sort of softly guiding them towards something that can help, but they don't know, and I'm not forcing it. It's not like, oh, you need to do this, and I write off a prescription, right? It's just fun. It's like, oh, interesting, tell me about that. And it's just, for me, getting to see the experience of being and knowing that my being is enough. That's it for me. So when I'm on stage, when I'm off stage, there's no real separation. I love what we do now, because before I used to do more like public speaking, slides. Now we just do this panel talk, and we're just talking. And, you know, there's a program I've got called Let's Break Bread. You know, sometimes we underestimate a conversation with someone can save a life. We live in a world where lots of us are living in silence. Lots of us are living in emotional suppression. So just talking to someone can birth things beyond your wildest dreams. So a lot of me relaxing is just being playful, having fun. We go-karting, bowling, we do the normal stuff. I've got boys, so we do some things that I don't want to do. So, you know, we're just familying, and it's about you finding your family balance. You know, where can you have more of what you enjoy doing? We just got back from Dubai, you know, all expenses paid trip, which was just absolutely insane. And it's like every day I'm just wowed by what life presents. You know, I'm so grateful for this gathering today. And, you know, thanks to Jade for connecting us up. And yeah, it's just people. I love people. So as long as I can be with people, as long as I can go and breathe, take my shoes off and touch the earth, I'm good.
Then there's an intentionality around you knowing what you need to fill your cup. And I think sometimes that's the key that people don't actually get to. Is like, what do I actually need? Is it just hanging around with friends? Is it just talking to people? Yes. Is it just having pajama days, all that kind of stuff? It looks different for different people. But identifying what that need is and that restoration point, that's the key. I think a lot of times, like, take a break. I'm like, yeah, but breaks look different for people. A break could be someone sat there reading a book, and someone that's their worst nightmare. Like, there's so many different levels of that. But that's why I love your response to that. It's like, actually, no, for me, it's being around people, it's having conversations that restores me, that makes me, re-energizes me and fills me back up again. And that's what it is that you need for you to ensure you don't get there again. And even that, recognizing different stages, the fact that before that, what your daughter gave to you worked then was great, but it's also a testament to your growth that actually what worked, like what I think there's a phrase by Marshall Goldsmith, what got us here wouldn't get us there. That
Yeah, I
learning to
love
always
that. Yeah.
consistently look at our journey and be like, are those tools still serving me? And they still giving me what I need in this next chapter, next stage of my life? Because sometimes that's where the struggle comes from. You're using old tools for new adventures and they just don't work anymore. And you
That's
have to
so
get new tools for the new
deep.
adventure you're stepping into.
Do you know,
So
I love what you just said, and I really want the listener to grasp onto what you just shared. Are we outgrowing our tools? Because if we're not, there's an issue. We are always changing, always. And if we're still using stabilizers after 3 years of riding the bike,
what would you say? I'm not sure if you do these, but when you think about the future and where you and the family are going and everything else, do you have goals and aspirations and plans like this is what we want to achieve and this is the vision that we want to step into? When you think about that legacy of making a difference to other people?
oh God, yeah. So we've got an amazing mentor, Regan Hillier. We met her in 2017. My daughter won a Regan Hillier Young Leaders Scholarship. And Lachey was invited to be flown out to Bali. And at the time, Trey wasn't feeling so good, so I actually took Trey with us. And we learned a lot there. And one of the things I really love about her teaching is she got us to do the vision beyond the vision. I was like, wow, I haven't done that before. So you have 2 vision boards going at all times. So often there's this teaching that you have one vision board and you have that up on the wall. But she talks about the vision beyond the vision. Because once the brain knows that that's done and sees the next one, it achieves the first one quicker because it's now fixated on the second one. I was like, oh, that's a mindset shift for me. I never really thought about that. So there's some things I can't go into. I've been well trained now. I used to just have verbal diarrhea, but there's some things I just can't speak out for obvious reasons. But yes, we've got some very clear goals in terms of what the vision is once we've achieved those visions. But some of the public ones, we want to set up a housing association. And this housing association is really going to be hands-on with a lot of the work that we do to teach people through. You see, one of the biggest issues that we saw in single parent households is support systems. So we want it to be that support system to families that are not there, that don't have that family. Financial education and personal development. And we felt that without those things, we can't really grow. But then if they're in the housing association, there could be a pot where they can eventually buy their own house. So it's a leap. It's a period of time they stay, they come out and they go in. Because like I said, you don't need stabilizers for 3 years of riding the bike. It's like, how can we stabilize families, get them to where they need to go forward? So we've got some visions around the housing association, the Ben Salmi, the Ben Salmi World Tour, becoming a household name. We want to actually create a TV series to help build momentum and magnetism around what we're doing, this whole movement. So there's lots of different things we're doing, but that's the cluster dream. There are 6 of us. We all have our 6 individual dreams. So Lachey's in cultural connectivity. She works with the Korean government. Trey Sean's in the world of finance. He's really into like asset management. He's just passed quite a substantial testing yesterday, which he's over the moon about, and he's just going to embark on his journey to uni. Yasmin's in the medical field. She wants to become a plastic surgeon. Paolo, he's into mindset and leadership. He's a climate activist. He's planted 10,000 trees. He does an array of things. Little Amir's about affirmation, telling on all of his siblings, telling everyone all the things that they do when they don't listen to mum's rules. So we all have very different dreams, but the clustering of what we do is that we offer that because families are made up of different characters. And this is why it's so important that we present. We talk about our good days, our bad days, because we all have them, right? And just like your podcast is that if we only speak about the good, how is that a roadmap for how to get there? It's not. It's only part of the map, and we can't get there that way. So there's lots of things that we have, and Paolo's working on this huge program at the moment called The Big Question. He's interviewing some amazing leaders from around the world. I think there's about 8 in his book series at the moment. And he's just exploring questions. Why don't we go back to questions? Questions are so powerful. They are the difference that makes the difference between us staying stuck and creating movement.
Listening to you talk about collaboration, connectivity, and vision, it's empowering, because there is something special around when you talk about, even earlier when you're talking about restoring families and mothers and fathers coming together and how that's been created. And that's obviously amazing, to be able to change that dynamic. But then to be able to hear you, even as a single mother, create this environment for your children, even though your circumstances, you're like, I didn't want this for myself, but this is what happened. But yet you didn't let that define you. You knew what you still envisioned, and you still stepped into that, and you were able to create that collaboratively with your kids, listening to God and walking in obedience. It's a powerful thing to be able to hear, because a lot of times have conversations with people and you hear that side, but then you hear that bitterness of like, how much this is. But your framing and the way that you look at things for me sounds different. To be able to walk in that, yes, this is my journey, what I'm doing right now, but I also know what it is that we're building, which looks different to what we have as well. But bringing those two worlds in alignment, where some people are like, why would you even do that? But you're merging them in such a way, as I'm listening to you talk, that for me sounds really, really intentional, but also breaks some of the stereotypes that we have in our culture as well.
Do you know, I just feel I want to speak to what you said. I'm your biggest fan. I love the way you question and the way you guide the guest. There's just something with regards to what the work I do. I often hear about bitterness, and I'm a very contextual person. So a lot of people are frowned upon or around, like, why are you bitter? Let this happen, or why don't you let access, or there's so many different arrays. You kind of get where I'm going, and I think it's us having the wisdom to sustain. I always say to my kids that in the integration process says more about the family and less about the problem. Does that make sense? So when I meet someone, because that's my area, right? I'm a coach, I'm a personal development coach. I hear this a lot. And I see the other side, the flip side, like these people that are bitter and seem quite sharp in life. They're very kind, loving and caring in the backdrop. And this outward bitterness is a protective mechanism because they've been through stuff and they've been mistreated. So in saying that, I'm saying all of this to speak to everything has context. So even if someone is in a state of bitterness, it's okay to have a conversation. And it's okay to recognize that maybe there's a reason as to why. Does that make sense? And what I mean is, people are not angry for no reason. Being a parent is hard. Being a single parent is hard. Like having the love of your life tear you apart and literally wanting to end you, end your visions, end the family, the empire, the legacy. It's hard. So it's more, if we learn to look read between the lines, just let that person know that you can see them and be there for them. A lot of people who are where they are is because they never had the stabilizers to get them to where they need to be. And I think I always say this to people from stage, one-to-one, is like, who are we in the village? You see, it's very easy for us to say and do and this, but the reality is so many people are living in isolation beyond what we understand. I've been into homes where people don't even have a mattress. People don't have washing machines, cookers. We've bought that for them. So I've seen what people don't always see. And if someone rendered you to that and that wasn't your state of being, that's not always bitterness. And again, like, some people are just bitter, I get that. But there's so many variations. And what I'm kind of speaking to is kind of the people that I kind of know, and that people just see me as being bitter. They see everything, but there's something called justified anger. And there's, there's this thing on social media, everyone's talking about narcissism, right? And it's this, when people erode you, there's this slow erosion. and the character is just taken away. You know, you look back at the cliffs and it's gone so deep over 10 years, and it takes time. And the reality is, when you are stripped away and there's an injustice and no one seems to hear, see, or care, you start to bite, you start to bark, you start to do whatever you can just to preserve the little that you have left. So a lot of these people that are bitter, they just need a hug. Just give them a hug, give them a kiss, say, okay, give me a hug, give me a kiss. we all, at our deepest essence as humans, we all want to be loved, and we all need someone, something to love. So I think it's just not saying what you said is wrong. I'm just speaking because I know that I'm going to have conversations with people and say, Sabrina, please say something for me. And it's because I don't see people. You see, there's this beautiful prayer you can say in the morning. You know, God, let my eyes be your eyes, let my heart be your heart. And if we remove ourselves sometimes, because we're limited, if we start to see the essence of God in each other, how differently would we see each other? If we start to recognize from an essence of compassion, to see that when was I there? And sometimes you will talk to a person, they just don't know. There's only so much you can do. But I'm just saying, meet everybody as if you're meeting them for the first time. Show them love, because we never know what people are battling with. Most people are fighting battles that we could not even understand. And especially now, it's worse. And because I call it a blessing to be able to sit down and have the gift that people trust me to be vulnerable. There are things that I'm aware of that I go, I wish people knew that about them. I really do. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit. Sorry.
Well, it's it was a good point, because actually understanding the context and the why behind why people show up is important.
Absolutely.
If you don't have that, and all you just see what's presented, you will miss so much more. So taking the time to dig deeper.
Yeah, because we're taught to normalize being beaten up and don't say anything, and you're so good. Oh, you know, there's a punch and another punch, and you're so good. That's toxic. We need to break, and I'm very mindful, especially, you know, there's this movie about domestic abuse and there's different things, and I'm like, oh, we need to get from that. You know, the mother's called bitter and she doesn't let this happen because of this. And it's like, you are just normalizing toxicity, toxic normality. Why are we teaching each other to keep smiling after you're being beaten up? Why should you be okay with that? Why should you even be okay with disrespect? And this is what mothers are being told, that you're a good mother as long as you don't X. No. My personal journey just has been different. Like I have so much love for their father because they are their father. If it wasn't, it's different. But I've been on my own journey, and I've intentionally done that because ultimately my big vision is to heal families. So I have to embody what I'm wanting to see. But there's a process. I never say to a mother, just because you're just allowing that child to throw tantrums without any boundaries, without any conditions, without any expectations. Where's the respect? And I feel so, you know, single fathers and single mothers, sometimes they're in this cycle of just doing what you have to do despite what the person's doing to you. That's not okay.
As we come to the end of this, which has been a powerful conversation, I guess the two questions I have for you to wrap up. The first one would be, what is it that you would like people to know that you don't ever get asked?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually don't know. What do I want people to know that I don't ever get asked? That's such a good question. I actually don't know. It's okay to just let life. Yeah, I guess I don't get asked a lot about the balance. Yeah, I guess that's the first thing that's coming up. I guess it's leaning into life being ebbs and flow. And I think that bit is so important. There's this joke we've got about coaching. You know, my coach said to say yes more. So they went to the shop. They don't drink coffee. Someone said, "Do you want a coffee?" Like, yes. You know, I don't like grass, but someone said, "Do you want to go for a walk through a park?" Yes. And then my hay fever's playing up. I want people to know that we have to learn to trust ourselves. We have to learn to go to source. We have to learn to go to God. God has the user manual. I don't get asked more, I guess I'm thinking more coaching and publicly. I don't get asked more about who do I need to become in order to X. It's normally like, I want to become a millionaire. I want multiple streams of income. I want all of this outward. But I'm always saying that it's the inward that presents the outward. And it's understanding that nuance that what we're seeking is there needs to be a bit more tangibility. It needs to go deeper. You started this podcast beautifully about this giving. And it's like when we need love, give love. It's easier said than done, but make that the direction that we're going into. It's the giving. And if we all collectively give, eventually we'll get to that utopia. So a lot of the time, I don't get asked about the deeper nature of presenting as us, that it's not about the glitz and glam. Like, none of what my children are doing has anything to do with where they're going. None of it. It's just disciplines that they're learning. And those disciplines become stabilizers and the foundation from what they will leap from. And, you know, they're not children. Some are young adults, you know, they're all varied ages, but they're still at those baby steps. I believe that the human brain doesn't actualize until 25. So all of my kids are under 25 now. And their adult brain comes into 25. And it's just all these disciplines are just in their toolbox. And I don't get asked about that because I think that is the holy grail. I think that's the difference that makes the difference. Also, the currency of life being relationships. You know, we hear that our network is our net worth, but we're still focusing on monetary. There's something so much deeper than that. There's something so much deeper than that. And if we go out and form meaningful, deep-rooted connections, connect with the intent to serve instead of to be served, connect with the intention to add value instead of to take value, this is when things start to happen. Everything starts in the heart. Your intentions are the seed of what's going to be birthed, not the other way around.
Church. That was a sermon. Love that. And my last question would then be, how do you define leadership?
I like your questions, but they're catching me off guard. Okay. How I define leadership is authenticity. Okay. One of my children, who was very shy growing up, he's hilarious. He's the most talkative now. He said to me, people can lead from the front, the back, or the middle. You see, I define leadership in having the ability to activate others, not saying, oh, I know this, I know that. So for me, leadership is very much about how much are you willing to serve? I love servitude leadership. The late Dr. Miles Monroe, we had the pleasure of meeting him when Shay was about 11, so 2011 it was when we met him, 2 weeks before he died, actually. And I love his books. His teachings are just profound. And I really connect to the essence of servitude leadership. You see, if we took everything away, all the labels, all the money and all the rest, and we only had servitude leadership, imagine what we would have. You see, if I connect with you and I see your family and I might produce yachts and I just gift you a yacht, and my son might gift you a jet, and my daughter might have, potatoes that she harvests. I think that's such a profound essence that when we connect as people, we really don't need to tap into all these illusions, these social constructs that we actually attach ourselves to. So leadership for me is always about a bigger picture beyond you. It's about legacy. It's about activating other people. Don't just include yourself. So leadership for me really goes back to the essence of authenticity, because if we all vibrate at our unique, authentic self, we finally present as the unique puzzle piece to the bigger puzzle. And that's all that I believe. I think there's a beautiful tapestry of life. I think we interrupt it by what we think we need to show up on. I've got this hat and that hat and that hat. And I love walking into rooms with my kids where people don't know us, because it's like, where's she going with all those kids? They're a bit older now. When they were young, oh God, oh no. And then they get up. The prayer is that I say to God, let them see us. And as a result of seeing us, they'll see you. Let them shift. So just by seeing, having that perception, having those internal dialogue, and then seeing what they're doing, already God's already worked with people individually. And it's really about how do we show up as our unique puzzle piece, because that's all that's important. You know, we had this crisis of everyone being locked at home, and I remember speaking to clients that were CEOs and all the rest. I was like, my God, what am I going to do? Everything's falling apart. And yes, the trauma, the shock is real. But what you were doing before, you're still that. Just do it for yourself. One of the things we talk about as a family is let's plant in our forests and plant in other people's forests too. Unfortunately, we're taught to pour all the work into our children and then auction them off to the highest bidder. When was the last time you shared the family legacy blueprint with your children? When did you sit down and have a family meeting about what is going to be generation free from you? What's going to happen there? And I think that is true leadership, because there's a hierarchical handing down of the baton. Each generation doesn't need to come and go, oh, well, I'm here. What do? We should be acing all our exams, because exams are not life. We hand down the blueprint. What I was learning in school is what they're still learning in school, no? So we've got to understand, let's stop sending our children to school in the hope that the school is going to grow them. And then when they don't, it's like it's a confusion and the school's failing. Schools are not failing children. Schools are actually doing what they were intended to do. I founded a school in West Croydon with some remarkable people, and schools are doing exactly what they're intended to do. The only shift that's happened differently is parents have stopped having a blueprint for their kids. What is your agenda? Why do you send your children to school? That did not come from me. That was my child who challenged me. Mum, why am I going to school? Then what? Then this, then. So I go to school, go to college, go to uni, leave uni, get a job. Mum, most of the people are stacking shelves. And the only reason that is because they never had a family legacy to go back into. They never had a seat at the table. Create a dinner table. Sit at it. Have space to invite guests. Don't only teach your children to go to dinner at other people's houses. Invite people over too. That's manners, okay? From us culturally, you have dinner, you invite for dinner. So it's how can we raise our children intentionally? How can we integrate them into a blueprint that lasts for generations? And it takes time, and not every family is there. And if you're listening to this is what our mission is about, to create those infrastructures so you can start understanding what to put in place. Because the reality is, sometimes we do things we don't even know why we're doing it. I was very intentional, and I never let school education interrupt the education of my children. And I remember saying that to a teacher, because they were having quite a lot of time off school, and they were doing work experience when they were in primary school. But I was very intentional because I knew I didn't have the village. So I had to create the village. And I knew that I didn't want to transition before I had put those building blocks in place. So the question to you as a listener is, what is the legacy that you're currently handing down to your children that's more than brick and mortar and money? What is it beyond that? And I'll leave it there.
Sabrina Ben Salmi, it has been a pleasure, a lesson, encouragement, inspiration. And I would say that it's important to give people their flowers while they're here. Like you talked about Mark Barone, for example, and obviously he died 2 weeks later, and that was just absolutely tragic. And I think for me, when I look at your story, look at your journey, look at what you've built and what you are building with your kids, I want to thank you actually for the work that you're doing. Because I think in our community in particular, we often look at change to come from, I want to call it celebrity or from those kind of echelons and those people. We're always looking up and up at people who also have very, very checked lives and ways of living that just show up very, very differently. And we can easily forget those people who are, for want of a better word, next door to us, who are actually living authentic lives, who are actually modeling authentic lives, who are actually making a difference and making a change in our communities. And that's what you and your family exemplify. Like you talked about the school that you've built, which is an award-winning, outstanding school infrastructure that you kind of put into place. And there's so many other things from the books and the curriculum and stuff like that, the impact that you have made consistently in the lives of families and kids, and just trailblazing in such a way that it's important for people to know and to recognize and to learn from as well. Because the more that even some of the things that you talked about today, we can take that into our psyche, look at ways of how we're living, how we're showing up, how we're having conversations with our families, look at what our blueprint looks like. That's how we're going to see real change and real transformation in our communities. It's not going to come from other spaces and places. And I'm going to end with the image that you had as a 7-year-old kid. You are currently living that out. And it's amazing to hear that link from then to now and see the world that you're living in and see that you are actually doing what you set out to do. And that imagination that you had that so many people try to dull down, you're just living that over and over and over again. It's just getting bigger and bigger and expanding. So that's amazing to see. So thank you very much for coming in today.
Oh, that's so beautiful that you said that. That is it. Living the dream. Definitely. That's so beautiful. Just one question I'd love to ask the listeners is, if you wasn't related to your family, would you be friends? That's something that just came into my heart when you were talking. I always say that, like, sometimes we take each other for granted just because we're family. You know, sometimes parents can be taken for granted because kids know they're not going nowhere and they treat other people better. Please, listening to this, please go home and learn to love your family, because sometimes the people that are bonded to us as family, if we wasn't family, they would not be your friends because of the way you treat them. So this has been amazing. Honestly, you've got so many different things percolating in my mind. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much for your time. And you have no idea of the impact that you've had on me, because just before I got to do something quite significant, you've reminded me of some aspects of my childhood, and I want to thank you for that gift. I really want to thank you.
Absolute pleasure. This is Everyday Leadership. We'll see you all next week.